So what actually happens when unstoppable, hard technological math slams right into the natural collapse of human institutions? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking Richard Turnock's dense, absolutely fascinating 2026 report, the Stellaris Meta-Framework. It's a really compelling look at the architecture of our coming order, mapping exactly how these massive economic and historical forces are colliding right now.
Populations abandon failing institutions fastest when viable alternatives exist. That is a massive statement, right? It totally anchors our entire journey today, establishing the real stakes of the civilizational transformation model between 2025 and 2032. It tells us that massive change doesn't just happen because people are angry, it happens because a better, cheaper option suddenly appears.
All right, to demystify this 60-plus page beast of a report, we're following a pretty clear cognitive roadmap. We're going to hit the synthesis, the 5 factors of disruption, the stacking effect, the legitimacy vacuum, and wrap up with the governance mandate. Let's get into it.
Starting off with Section 1, the synthesis, where 2 massive forces are colliding.
Okay, force number 1 is Tony Seba's take on Wright's law. Basically, this economic principle says that every time we double the global production of something like, say, solar panels or batteries, the cost drops by a totally predictable mathematical percentage. It's like a giant economic gravity. Think about how much a flat-screen TV cost 20 years ago versus what you'd pay today. This cost curve happens completely independent of any political intention or policy. It's just pure physics and math, and it's fundamentally rewiring our energy grid as we speak.
Then we have force number 2. Neil Howe's concept of the fourth turning. If you aren't familiar, this is an 80 to 100-year historical cycle. It's a generational rhythm that predictably ends in this huge collapse of institutional legitimacy, forcing society to basically reconstruct itself. I mean, think back about 80 years ago to the climax of World War II. That was our last major turning. Turnock's big argument here is that these 2 forces, the relentless technology cost curves and this historical generational crisis, are literally crashing into each other concurrently, causing a massive societal shift this very decade.
Moving on to Section 2, the 5 factors of disruption and their parity thresholds.
Here, Turnock systematically models 5 foundational pillars of society that are currently crossing competitive cost parities. And we aren't just talking about marginal, tiny improvements here. We are looking at a total phase shift. Energy is rapidly moving from fossil fuels to solar, wind, and battery. Transport is being entirely upended by electric and autonomous fleets. Labor is fundamentally shifting from human wages to humanoid robotics. Knowledge is bypassing terrestrial cables for satellite AI. In food, it's completely decoupling from traditional agriculture through precision fermentation. And the wild part? It is all happening at the exact same time.
Now check out this specific number, $53 per kilowatt hour for CATL batteries in 2024. That proves energy parity isn't some future dream, it is already a reality. Why does this matter to us? Because at $53, grid-scale battery storage drastically undercuts the pure economics of traditional natural gas peaking plants. The foundational layer of the entire economy, the actual power keeping your lights on, is moving from centralized scarcity to absolute abundance.
Looking at transportation, an electric Tesla Semi saves up to $300 per 500-mile trip compared to a standard diesel truck. That completely reprices commercial freight. I mean, when you scale that $300 savings across a fleet of 50 trucks running all year long, you are suddenly looking at millions of dollars in pure savings per fleet. The old freight economics, which were totally built on diesel arbitrage and really complex engine maintenance, they literally cannot survive against this math.
And then the framework models physical labor crossing its own disruption parity when humanoid robots hit the manufacturing floor at scale. Think about what that actually means for a second. When non-human labor significantly undercuts human wages across manufacturing, logistics, and service industries, the embedded labor cost in your clothes, your phone, your daily deliveries, it fundamentally approaches zero. It is a complete and total rewiring of what physical goods should cost.
Finally, dropping rocket launch costs to $100 per kilogram enables satellite broadband to connect 2.2 billion new people to the global economy practically overnight. If you could launch cheaply enough, you just bypass digging trenches for ground cables entirely. And on the biological front, precision fermentation completely decouples our food from geographic constraints. You no longer need arable land, perfect weather, or millions of acres of pasture to feed the planet. We can literally brew proteins exactly where they are needed.
That brings us to Section 3, the stacking effect, which is all about multiplying the disruption.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that these 5 factors don't just add up, they multiply. The report uses Tesla's integrated physical AI architecture to show this compounding effect in the real world. It's like a massive stacking loop. First, you have the capital loop, where revenue funds new infrastructure. Then, the information loop. Those deployed units, like thousands of autonomous cars driving around, feed constant real-world training data right back to the AI. And through the efficiency loop, that smarter AI drives down manufacturing scale costs. The cycle then violently repeats, feeding the next big breakthrough. It's incredible to watch.
In this setup, AI acts as a convergence layer. It's basically the master conductor, compounding the speed of all these markets simultaneously. It isn't just optimizing solar panel output, it's coordinating those autonomous fleets, it's managing really complex bioreactor conditions for food production, and it's accelerating financial capital deployment all at the exact same time.
Let's pivot to Section 4, the legitimacy vacuum, or society's breaking point. This timeline maps out that 80-year historical cycle we mentioned earlier, visually showing how civic decay leads straight into a crisis window. Now, according to the fourth turning theory, you've probably felt institutional legitimacy steadily eroding since around 2008. But the critical structural insight here is that this legitimacy hits absolute rock bottom precisely between 2025 and 2032. Which just so happens to be the exact moment these incredibly cheap, distributed technologies arrive to replace those broken institutions.
We really need to contrast the old system with the new one here. The old extraction economy relies on centralized choke points, basically managing scarcity and extracting fees from it. The new abundance economy, however, is distributed, surplus-based, and literally routes right around those old choke points. Think about it. People are going to stop complying with old expensive institutions the very second they can buy true energy independence for their home or beam gigabit internet straight from space.
The framework impartially diagnoses 4 markers of what it calls organized sociopathy, to explain exactly why broken institutions fight so hard to block new, efficient technologies. You see dynamics like rule asymmetry, where the incumbents get a free pass while innovators get heavily penalized. Or language inversion, where phrases like grid reliability are actually used as an excuse to block reliable new energy assets. Add in accountability theater and legitimacy extraction, and you're looking at a system that isn't necessarily corrupt on an individual level, but is structurally captured by the old way of doing things.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the governance mandate, and what's called the millennial hero task. Turnak argues that we are currently making the Marshall Plan error. Unlike the 1940s, we don't actually need massive, centralized federal programs to build this new distributed economy. Consumer economics and Wright's law are already doing that beautifully on their own. The real mandate today is entirely about grabbing a pair of scissors and just cutting the red tape that is holding it all back.
And this brings us to the repair doctrine, which is the historical task assigned to the millennial generation as they step into power during this phase of the cycle. It's essentially structural triage. You retain and reform the agencies that still work, you replace the ones that are captured, and you simply dissolve the obsolete frameworks without replacing them at all. Like massive agricultural subsidies, right? They just no longer make sense when we can precisely brew our food in bioreactors.
But timing is literally everything here. This is what Turnak refers to as pre-commitment. If we wait for the absolute peak of the crisis in 2032 to scramble and write new rules, we are going to end up with flawed, panic-driven structures. The blueprints for independent accountability in this new society, they have to be drawn right now, while the storm is still gathering.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to ponder as you consider how these two unstoppable forces are going to shape our next decade. The technology is undeniably arriving. It is driven by pure, unyielding mathematics. But will the generation in charge actually clear the institutional barriers in time to unlock this abundance? Or will they fight it to the bitter end? It really is the defining question of our time. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. We hope breaking this down has given you a whole new lens to view the architecture of the coming order.